Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. So I've been using the iPhone 15 Pro Max for about a week now, and I have quite a few thoughts about this device. So in this video, I'm going to be giving my review of this phone after a week of using it, so you can decide whether or not it's worth getting one. Since I am a fan of upfront conclusions, I'm just going to say that if you're coming from an iPhone 12 series or before, then 15 Pro Max is going to be a very nice upgrade. But if you're coming from a 13 or 14, whilst there are a lot of nice features in this phone, I wouldn't really be in a rush to upgrade unless you've smashed your battery or, whatever. But yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Starting off with one of the biggest changes to the 15 Pro series, that's with the design. So Apple have redesigned the Pro iPhones this year with new titanium edges. So previously, the Pro iPhones had this frosted glass back with squared off stainless steel sides that caught quite a lot of fingerprints, and it made them honestly quite difficult to hold in the hands. They were also very heavy, which is one of the reasons why I used to avoid the Pro Max iPhones, because they would just be too uncomfortable to use. This year, however, Apple's using titanium, which is generally a lot lighter of a material than stainless steel. And after using this thing, I can definitely feel the difference. On paper, it only looks like a small difference, but during day-to-day usage, it makes all the difference. I'd go as far to say that my new 15 Pro Max feels just as light as my old 14 Pro. And with these new slightly rounded corners, it's extremely comfortable to hold and use whilst caseless. I will say, you can definitely still see the smudges on the titanium sides, especially on the darker models, but they're a little bit less pronounced than stainless steel edges. But otherwise, this thing feels very premium. I remember when I first heard Apple was getting rid of stainless steel, I was worried that the iPhone would feel a lot less premium. One thing I've really liked about stainless steel was that it made the Pro iPhones feel almost like a piece of jewelry. But yeah, I'm happy to report that experience has not changed with the 15 Pro Max. Supposedly, titanium is also supposed to be stronger. However, there have been a lot of tests where the 15 Pro Max bends and snaps more easily than the 14 Pro Max. Realistically, though, as long as you're not beating the hell out of your phone, which I don't know why you would be, you should be fine. Another thing I forgot to note is that the bezels on this phone are actually a tad slimmer. On paper, again, it's quite a small difference, but in real life, it does make the display feel a lot more expansive and a lot more modern, which is nice. As far as colors go, I've gone with the black titanium model this year. I went with silver last year, but I felt it just stood out a bit too much, which maybe is something you're looking for, but for me, I want something that's a bit stealthier, a bit sleeker. And I remember I often found myself just staring at my silver iPhone when I had it sat on my desk because the color just stood out. Whereas my black titanium model, it just blends in so much more. To bear in mind this year as well is that Apple are actually using a new coating process to color their iPhones. So if you scratch the surface of the coating on the sides, the color will actually start to wear away and show off the natural titanium color underneath. If that is something that might concern you, it could be better to go for the natural titanium or white titanium colors and to avoid the darker blue and blacks. However, that said, realistically, I'm not going to be pointing a sharp object at my phone most of the time, and, I'm going to have a case on. So this isn't really something that I'm personally worried about. One change I did make this year as well was going with the larger Pro Max iPhone model. So historically, I was put off by the Pro Maxes because I just thought they would be too large and cumbersome to use one-handed and too heavy. However, after a week of using this, I can confidently say that this has not been an issue. Like, yeah, if you're trying to access Control Center with your left hand, then you have to do a bit of fancy maneuvering, but you easily get used to it, and it's worth the benefits you get. And the main benefit you get is with the battery life, because this thing is just a battery king. I was out for about 13 hours last Wednesday, left the house with 93% at 8 a.m., came back home at 10 p.m. with just over 20. And that was after a full day of maybe not heavy, but pretty intense use. I was doing a lot of web surfing, social media and video usage, taking photos, using my mobile data throughout most of the day. No real gaming because I'm not much of a gamer, but I know that if I had my 14 Pro with me, that thing would have died by mid-afternoon, 3 or 4 p.m. So the fact that this phone can get me through the entire day means I no longer have to carry around my MagSafe battery pack with me. Even previously, I used to have to charge my 14 Pro when it got to about 30% because I was always worried about where my next charge was coming from. But with the 15 Pro Max, I'm more than happy for this thing to be at 52% and to go out for the evening because I know it's going to last me until tomorrow morning. Obviously, the majority of these benefits are simply a function of me moving from the Pro to the Pro Max model because the Maxes have a larger battery. So, if you're on a 13 Pro Max or a 14 Pro Max, you might experience similar levels of battery. But yeah, it's just such a huge relief not having to worry about where my next charge is coming from. It's just relieved a lot of anxiety for me. I also find it funny that Apple kept the battery ratings the same on their website to the 14 Pros, even though a lot of people, including myself, have been reporting better battery life with this phone. I think that might be because the 14 Pros were just so bad to begin with that they never actually hit their targets. So maybe these new 15 Pros should hit that target. So even though the paper battery life is the same, in reality it should be better. Also, from what I've seen, this thing is slightly better than the 14 Pro Max, but it's a bit below the 15 Plus. So yeah, I think that's interesting how the cheaper iPhone models get longer battery life. But I've got no complaints with this. And I'd say that hit to the battery life is probably down to the new chip powering this phone. So the new iPhone Pros come with Apple's A17 Pro chip, which is the world's first and currently only chip built on a 3 nanometer process, which is just a fancy way of saying that the distance between the transistors on this thing is smaller, which enables Apple to include more transistors and therefore perform more computational tasks per unit time. And it's no secret that this chip is extremely powerful. In some ways, it's actually more powerful than the M1 chip that powered Apple's MacBook Airs in single core performance, which supposedly should make this thing a beast for gaming. However, the issue is that when you put this thing under pressure, the phone can actually get quite hot. There have been a lot of complaints from users online about how their Pro iPhones are overheating, even during simple tasks. And that's likely because the efficiency upgrades from this chip haven't been enough to offset the additional power. And when you combine that with the lack of a proper cooling system and the titanium chassis, which dissipates heat less effectively, then I can see why some people might be having issues. For me personally, I've not had too many issues with overheating, except for when I was first setting up the phone. But that's expected because when you're first setting up the device, you're performing a bunch of tasks in the background, whilst everything's transferring over. But since then, I haven't really noticed many issues. So I have a feeling it might be simply due to Apple lowering their efficiency standards for the A17 Pro chip. So it's a bit of a lottery where one iPhone might have overheating issues, whereas another iPhone might be completely fine. So if you are experience overheating issues, it might be worth trying to see if you can return your iPhone and then purchasing a new one. Obviously, I know that's easier said than done right now because you're probably going to be waiting till November or a few months to get your new phone. But if this is something that's really bugging you, that might be a potential solution. Or just wait until Apple introduces a new OS update that could potentially fix this issue. But yeah, in summary, processor is unnecessarily powerful, and I personally think Apple would have been better off improving the efficiency on these chips to give us better battery life. Because realistically, how much more performance do we really need in an iPhone? I also find it quite interesting how Apple labeled this a Pro chip, because presumably this means that the regular iPhone 16s next year are likely going to be getting a standard A17 chip that's in theory less powerful, and that actually might be more efficient, resulting in more battery life. So I guess it's a bit like how there's a differentiation between the MacBook Airs and the Pros with the M2 and M2 Pro chips. Another highlight feature of the Pro iPhones this year was the new action button. So Apple have gotten rid of the mute switch and they've replaced it with a customizable action button. Now, when I first set this thing up, I thought we were going to be limited to things like the camera, the flashlight, basic smartphone functions. But Apple have also let us map the action button to shortcuts, which in theory lets you do almost anything with your iPhone. I've seen some people turn the action button into a secondary control center. Some people have mapped it to different focus modes so that when you're in Do Not Disturb, the action button performs a different function to when you're in work mode, which isn't something you'd expect from a company like Apple that usually likes to have a tighter grip on their features. So I am glad that they've made this action button very versatile. Personally, I've mapped my action button to the camera, which might be a bit of a boring option. I know you guys are going to be saying, look, you've already got 3 ways of accessing the camera. With the home button, you can swipe left on the home screen as well. I think you can add it to control center as well. But I find that there are occasionally times where I just want to quickly capture a moment, quickly on the spot, and I find that in those situations, trying to, tap on your home screen and swipe right, it's a little bit of a faff. And in those situations, if the action button can save me even a few seconds to get out my camera and capture that memory on the spot, that makes it more than worth it for me because, those memories are going to be invaluable for me. Speaking of the camera, we've got quite a few camera updates on the iPhone 15 Pros this year, even though it may not seem like it on the surface. So firstly, we've got a larger 48 megapixel sensor, which should be able to capture in more light, resulting in better quality photos, especially in low light situations. Secondly, Apple have used a new coating for the camera lenses to combat some of the glare you get when your camera is exposed to a large light source. The problem hasn't been completely eradicated, but it's been mitigated slightly. Thirdly, the iPhone now has the ability to take portrait photos even when you're not in portrait mode. So you can take a normal photo and have the option to convert it into a portrait after, which I think is really cool, especially when you're getting somebody else to take a photo for you. You now no longer need to explain to them, oh, look, make sure it's in portrait mode, because you can deal with that after. Fourthly, the iPhones now have the ability to take spatial video, which just means that, if you buy a Vision Pro headset next year or even in 10 years' time, you've got the peace of mind that, the videos you take today will be able to be viewed on that Vision Pro in 3D, which I think is a nice future-proofing feature because it means that if you do decide to purchase a Vision Pro later on in life, you've got the assurance that you'll have your memories saved in the correct format for, 10 years down the time. And I have a feeling that Apple are going to use that as a big part of their marketing push for the Vision Pro, like the ability to relive your memories live, something similar to that. So, yeah, it's pretty impressive that your iPhones can now capture spatial video. Finally, on the Pro Max iPhones only, we've now got a 5x optical zoom lens, which can digitally crop up to 25 times as well. So if you're at a concert or a sports game and you need to zoom in on the action, you'll now be able to do that without sacrificing as much detail. You can still get a 5x zoom on the regular Pro iPhones. However, that will be a digital crop. So essentially what it's doing is using the 3x camera, which is a 12 megapixel lens, and it's just cropping in on that. It would be the same thing as you taking the photo with that 3x lens and just cropping it in the Photos app after. And obviously, if you have a 12 megapixel photo and you zoom in on that, you're going to end up with an image that's less than 12 megapixels. So with this 5x lens in the 15 Pro Max, that is a 12 megapixel 5x lens. So you're not losing any quality. Unless you're taking a 4.9x photo, in which case the image quality is actually going to be worse on the 15 Pro Max than the 15 Pro. So whether or not this is a good thing depends on, which zoom lens you tend to use the most. I find for myself that I usually either zoom in a lot, like 10x, or I use the 1 or 2x zoom lens. I tend not to use the 3x that often. So just to summarize there, for anything up to 3x, the 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max will have the same image quality. Between 3x and 4.9x, the 15 Pro will beat the 15 Pro Max. And then for 5x and beyond, the 15 Pro Max will beat the 15 Pro. So I hope that gives you a sense of, which camera system you might be better choosing. It really boils down to how often you find yourself using that 5x lens. Because yeah, this feature is exclusive to the 15 Pro Max iPhones only. My guess is that's because Apple haven't yet found a way to fit this into the regular Pro models, but hopefully it's something that should trickle down later. Now, moving on to what was probably the highlight of the entire Apple event this year, and that's the introduction of USB-C. To be fair, there isn't really anything new here. Like, we've had USB-C on other devices for a decade nearly, but it's nice that we finally get it on the iPhone. I still think it's a long way before I can get rid of all my Lightning cables. I still need to keep cables for my AirPods, my Magic Keyboard and mouse, and my family's old iPhones. But it's nice to know that this thing is now future-proofed, and hopefully in 5 years' time, I should be able to have one cable for all my devices. We also get 10 gigabit transfer speeds on the Pro iPhones as well. That's exclusive to the Pro models only, which can come in useful if you're transferring large amounts of data and footage. However, you will need to purchase a separate USB-C cable that supports those speeds. But if I'm being totally honest here, I haven't really found myself using the USB-C port for charging really. Most of the time, if I do use the port, it's because I'm connecting my phone to a monitor to watch a video. But yeah, I tend to use MagSafe charging for most of my charging these days. And because of how good the battery life on this phone is, I rarely find myself having to actually charge this thing via cable. But yeah, those are the main differences I've noticed whilst using this phone for the past week. There are also other features as well, like the better speakers. There's a new battery optimization feature that lets you charge the 15 Pro and Pro Max to just 80%. So some of you might be on 13 or 14 Pro iPhones and you're probably thinking, should I upgrade? I think, if you've got the cash, by all means, go for it. I think there are enough upgrades to kind of justify that this year, but, you shouldn't be in any rush to do it. If you're coming from an 11 Pro or, maybe a 12 Pro as well, there are enough new features to justify that upgrade. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts on the iPhone 15 Pro Max in the comments down below. If you found this video useful, give us a like and be sure to subscribe. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.